What's going on, everybody? I am Luka. Of course, I am not Josh, the normal first host of this show. Josh is out. He has a little bit of things to deal with at this moment in time on his plate. So I am hosting, and friend of the show, someone that has been on previous programs with us, our dear friend, I'm always used to go on this side, Joe over here has joining us. He is gracing his presence. He is sitting in the co-host seat tonight with myself as we have a big game going to talk about when it comes to Dolphins Bills. Joe, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Luka. I am also not Josh McCartney, but it really is. I just said McCartney, like Paul McCartney. McCartney. That always messes me up, Josh. If you're
Yeah.
somehow watching, I am so sorry. I just botched your name on the co-host seat of your show. That is such disrespect. So I will pay for that later. But no, I'm doing great, man. It is really good to be here. I appreciate you inviting me. And I'm really excited to talk about this matchup and really all things Bills tonight.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to bury the lead. There's no reason to bury what's going on here. This is the biggest game of the season. Everything is on the line. The Bills are traveling down to Miami for a division title game, a rare thing that happens in the NFL where week 18, everything is on the line between both opponents for the division, no matter the outcome, as long as win-loss happens. Obviously, tie, someone would get a division. Unfortunately, that would be the Dolphins, but ties are hard to come by these days. So whoever wins this game will take the AFC East. And if the Bills do so, it would be for that fourth consecutive time. And it would be, honestly, in my mind, just say right out the bat, a perfect ending to this season, because it's been the ultimate roller coaster. And now they find themselves in a place where they can just take it all back and almost act as if all the highs and lows that have come with this season didn't happen. They put themselves in a good position and everything's fine. So right out the gate, Joe, I want to kick it over to you. Your initial feelings going into Sunday night. How are you feeling about this matchup? How has it gone throughout the week? Has anything changed your mind? What are your thoughts right out the gate at the top of your head about this Sunday night matchup between the Bills and the Dolphins?
Well, I was naturally nervous going into it just because I know what the stakes are. You play for this moment. We had talked about since the bye week and the circumstances that the Bills found themselves in, that they got to go on a run. And going on that run entails winning 5 games. You have won your 4, you're 4-0, and now you need to go get that final win against Miami. So while we beat them 48-20 in Buffalo earlier in the year, obviously it's a long season. Things are changed. How their offenses run will change a little bit. How their defense is played has changed. And that makes you nervous. But at the same time, despite the sluggishness and sloppiness of how this Bills team has seemed to come out in the past 2 weeks offensively, I do have this level of excitement and even a little bit of confidence that they are going to have quite a good performance against Miami for a few reasons that I think we'll get to on this show. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a dog walk. I'm not going to say anything other than Miami is a good team. You got to do it. You got to do or die. But also, I think the Bills have found themselves in this situation too many times in McDermott's tenure, and they are in a serious situation now. And I don't think they've won 4 games just to fall asleep at the wheel in the 5th. So I have good faith that at the very least, they're going to come out and be competitive.
Yeah, that's a fair point to bring up. I mean, honestly, I haven't been nervous at all, Joe. I will say this has been one of the things that off air with Josh, and even honestly on air, both in our live show and our podcast throughout the weeks, ever since I want to say it was the Eagles game. So I guess that would be leading into the bye. I kept kind of hinting and looking forward and telling Josh and telling friends that I have and stuff. And I'm like, guys, I truly do not care about at the time how the Browns are doing, how the Texans are doing, how all these. I'm like, the division is still right there in front of them. And I truly believe that things will break down in a way where come week 18, this game will be exactly like what we find it to be now. And it's incredible that we do find ourselves in this place, considering where the team was going into that bye week. But at the same time, it's kind of to an attribute of who the Dolphins are as a team, but then also who the Bills are when their backs are against the wall and when they really just need to show up what they can be and what we've seen these past few weeks, that I don't feel a reason to be nervous about it. Because if 5 weeks ago me was feeling okay that the division would still be up for grabs, why would I be any different now that we find ourselves in that exact predicament? So, I mean, I understand if anyone's nervous out there. I think, it is a true coin flip game in my eyes, even with considering a couple of the things that we will get into shortly. But overall, the Bills being slight favorites, betting favorites on the road makes a lot of sense because at the end of the day, I think the Bills are just a better team with more experience going into this matchup with everything on the line. Whereas also there is that failsafe for the Dolphins where they truly don't have to go all out. They already are in. They have their playoff position secured. They're just playing for seeding and a division title that, hey, a banner's cool, but at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is put yourself in the best position for a playoff run. So they're going to do whatever it is that helps them in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I talked about how we're going to get into a few things that come into this matchup. The biggest story in this matchup, even something that Roy Collins over here, shout out you, Roy, brings up the banged up Miami team. Injuries. Injuries are a big story in this matchup. I think there's a lot to discuss with when it comes to the Dolphins specifically on injuries. We already know Xavier Howard's out. We of course know that Bradley Chubb is out. That was a wild thing that Miami chose to do in the fourth quarter, having him still in there, but that's another discussion entirely. Mostert and Waddle just practiced today after being out Wednesday and Thursday. They are listed as questionable. And then Jerome Baker himself, he was a limited participant all week. He is listed as questionable. It actually does look like they're a little healthier than what you probably could have expected come earlier in the week. There's offensive line that were question marks, but they're good to go. It seems like everything like that, but big key guys, Xavier Howard already out, Waddle and Mostert being true questionables in my mind. What do you think the impact is like? What does the matchup truly flip? I will say this, Joe, on if Mostert and or Waddle play in this matchup compared to if they, unfortunately for the Dolphins and fortunately for us, cannot play in this game come Sunday night.
Well, I think your last sentence kind of says it, right? Fortunately for us, if they don't play, I do think they absolutely matter because anytime you could take a respected playmaker out of that Miami offense is an opportunity for your defense to bear down on one specific thing more. So if Jalen Waddle doesn't play, while I do think that they still have a pretty decent receiving room, obviously take Tyreek Hill out of it and you look at the depth, and their depth is speedy and versatile with Berrios and Wilson, guys like that can contribute to an explosive play. I do think that not having the worry of where they line Waddle up in addition to Hill and having to deal with the deep threat of him and his speed going both vertically and horizontally does absolutely matter for a secondary that has been clicking and might use that as a way to galvanize. So for at least Jalen Waddle, I do get it. And with Raheem Mostert, I mean, again, he is one of, if not leading the league, I believe he's leading the league in touchdowns currently for a running back. He is a huge part of what they do, especially in the red zone. He's been very dependable. You could run him outside. He has great speed, even despite his age, and he's very hard to tackle. So not having him across from you and knowing that Devon Achane is going to be the primary back, and the fact that you can now kind of hone in on him a little bit more, to me is a massive benefit for the Bills. But going into this matchup specifically, even if both play, we do have to remember that when they came to Buffalo, they had both of these players, and the Bills were still able to neutralize them because Sean McDermott had a great game plan that entailed pressure, that entailed hurry to it up, that entailed taking that read away to be able to get him to hold the ball up, and doing so with a banged up offensive line, which is what Miami has going into this matchup. So while I do think that they do matter and they absolutely change the complexion of Miami's offense, I do still think that the Bills defense is experienced enough to come up with a game plan that can at least stop the bleeding from this team, because you know they'll get their punches in.
Yeah, I love the both sides take you kind of bring to that, because that's kind of the big picture I wanted to bring up myself even with this. It's like, it's one of those two things where, yes, if they miss this game, that's massive for the Bills. And of course, it does tip the scale a little bit more in favor for the Bills. Why wouldn't it? If you essentially only have to concern yourself with one half of the field, we'll call it, with Tyreek Hill because no Waddle. And then also you do lose. It's funny. Mostert is one of the fastest players on their team. Obviously, they have a ton of speed, but he is included in that group. But he's also that physicality that I think they really need in that offense as well. Like you mentioned, the red zone presence that he is over 20 touchdowns combined, that leading the league among running backs. I think he's at 21, but I know it's over 20. So we're just going to go with that. He's vital to how they attack, especially in short spaces and in tight spaces and whatever they're trying to do to achieve, crossing that goal line when in and goal, or at least in the red zone situation. So if Mostert is out, which I believe is a bigger impact compared to Waddle, that is massive for the Bills. But then on the flip side, as you also talked about, this Bills team, now it's a different defense, which we will get into very shortly. I had that kind of listed there, but it's a great kind of jumping point from here. This Bills defense already showed that with them at health, they were able to manage things. Sean McDermott did a great job scheming up whatever he did with a much more healthy defense at the time, but he schemed up a great game plan to take the full arsenal of Miami and to really make Tua think about where he's throwing it, which is kind of where he falls off, and then do things that neutralize both Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, and Mostert wasn't really truly able to get, kind of off the ground running. And it became kind of this thing where we saw a Miami offense that couldn't even get out of first gear, essentially. And then eventually the Bills just pulled away in that week 4 matchup. And we saw the largest point outcome for the Bills this entire season. So kind of now springboarding off of that, Joe, you talked about the defense. We talked about the defense. We're talking about the defense. The offense is all flashy here, but let's talk about this defense. The defense we saw week 4 that did exactly what we're talking about was same but different in a weird way. And I feel like that there's certain things about this defense that may not be quite as good anymore personnel wise, but then there's also other parts that I find much better at this point in time than where they were week 4. Thank you, Rasul Douglas. We'll just get that one right out of the way. But overall, when you look at the defense come week 4 and then come this upcoming Sunday, honestly, is it a weird thing for me to say that I'm much more comfortable with what we will see come Sunday night out of the defensive side of this team than where I thought they were going to be come week 4 when they were playing that vital matchup early in the season? Because I'll be honest, this defense has been over the moon in impressing me from all levels and everything like that. And then on top of it all, Daquan Jones, who I think only had 17 snaps last week, still did look effective in his own right. In some capacity, we'll call it. I mean, it's coming off a torn pec, so give the guy a little bit of a break. He's immobilized in one half of his body, essentially. But he looked effective. He's getting back in there. He's getting snap counts. The defensive line was being destructive last week. Ed Oliver, of course, is just being an unbelievable all-pro level guy this season. And then that secondary. Is it crazy to feel much better about the defense now compared to what we felt like going into that week 4 matchup?
Well, it's a shame that Ed Oliver's playing at an all-pro level, but apparently just isn't good enough to be a Pro Bowl starter. Sorry, Ed. Better luck next year. Anyways, I don't think it's crazy. And I actually pulled some stats about this Bills defense since the bye, specifically their passing defense, that were very, very striking to me. So they are first in dropback EPA since their bye week. They're 9th in dropback success rate since the bye. So their passing defense has been absolutely buzzing. And I think that while they just got Daquan Jones back, even prior to that, they were having a lot of success getting pressure on quarterbacks and really wreaking havoc. You saw it against Dallas. You saw it at times against Kansas City. And you saw it really on display at times towards the second half of that Chargers game. And like I said before, and as I said on my show earlier this week, I think this game is quite literally going to be won or lost based off how much pressure you are able to get to Tua and how difficult you make it for him to see the field. In this case, I don't think it's crazy because they've played such tight, consistent pass defense against some really good quarterbacks in the mix of their 4 games that based on what you saw when they played in Buffalo in week 4 to now, you see that this defense has kind of been, if you want to call it, torn down and rebuilt with the addition of Rasul Douglas and with the consistent play of your safeties. By the way, Jordan Poyer didn't play in that week 4 game, and you have Jordan Poyer now. So when you include him in this defensive game plan, you can actually get a little bit more creative in how you want to defend them. Whether you want to throw some dime looks at them, whether you want to, like someone in the comments suggested, maybe have it where you rush Dotson or a different linebacker up the middle and have a safety drop into his spot to just create more problems for Tua if he's trying to get a short throw off. These are the things that I think you have the luxury of doing now that this defense is fully healthy. And since the bye, their passing defense has been great. So I think you can be confident. Where I think there's a little bit of concern is their rushing defense, because they're 22nd in rush EPA since the bye and 16th in rush success rate since the bye. So they are allowing a decent amount of runs against them. But again, like I think, at the end of the day with Miami, they can run the ball and we know that they can do it well, but can they run it an entire 4 quarters And if they decide to sell out with that game plan, is it going to be a situation where that's all they can do and it can get sniffed out? So that's really what I'm trying to look at. But if Miami tries to, really sell on throwing the ball because they have a Waddle and they have Tyreek Hill, and why would you not use them? Then I think the Bills could have a lot of success in this game. And I think you could see some turnovers generated, which this defense has been very good at doing as well. So I don't think you're crazy for it. I mean, they've definitely proven that they can hang with some really good teams, and this is a huge test that they're going to be ready for.
Yeah, it's one of those feelings where the comment, you worded it perfectly. It was great. They rebuilt. They kind of broke it down at the bye week, and it feels like they've rebuilt this defense in a different but yet similar philosophy to what they've had in prior this season and even prior years. This defense feels more and more like one that was a few years ago, where they essentially are playing this aggressive umbrella coverage, and they are just begging you and absolutely begging you to throw the ball. They don't want you to run it. They don't. If you run it, you're going to get chunk plays. They are there. They're available. That's what this defense is going to give you. Where I think it almost goes into the hands of the Bills is the Dolphins are the type of team that you even hear Dolphins fans, you hear, major individuals who watch the sport because it's their job. They talk about, can the Dolphins just truly run the ball more and more and not eventually get caught in that mindset that they seem to all the time, where it's like, hey, the ground game's been great. We're averaging 5.2 on the ground and stuff like that right now through half of the game. We're going to just air it out about 30 times.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, like, see you later. They do it all the time. And I think that's just, at the end of the day, the identity of the Dolphins. They are who they are. They have way too much of a track record to show you that they would do anything differently. And I understand it. I will say, if you had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as your 1-2, it's so hard not to want to just throw them the ball constantly.
Right.
They are track athletes. They are stars. Tyreek Hill is a top 3 wide receiver in the league. They are unbelievable talents. You want to get them the ball. But at the end of the day, if the run game is effective and working, and you do have a Raheem Mostert, you have a Devon Achane who can break one open at any point in time, and the defense is giving you all of those lanes and opportunities, you should probably be running it 40 plus times and just completely ignoring everything. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I do believe that is where the Bills could lose. Take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. You run it 40 plus times. The defense is going to allow it. They'll eventually break down. That's where it is. I just think this defense is built so well into the hand of where the Dolphins will eventually find themselves, where they want to throw it. And yeah, Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford's been playing really well opposite of Douglas ever since. That's been kind of the true matchup, 1-2. And then Tremaine Johnson, even when Rasul Douglas came in and everything like on the boundary became a lot harder and everything, it seems like Tremaine Johnson, who at times was struggling middle part of the season, it seems like he's getting his groove back. It seems like that slot role, that big slot that he likes to play in, is really getting back to him, and he's figuring things out right now. That with that, Jordan Poyer's another great point that he wasn't in Miami. He's also playing in the box more, disguising coverages and looks a lot more for this defense down the stretch. Yeah. They're doing so much more with that, we'll call it back seven, that you just truly don't know what you're seeing. And Tua and Miami need to understand what they're seeing so that he can throw on time, throw in rhythm, and all of that stuff. And it's just not going to be a fun day for them in the passing game. So ultimately, that is why I just feel better about this defense where it is now. Whereas before, it was very, Matt Milano's got to cover the entire middle of the field. Terrell Bernard was having a good season already at that point, but you still were in the early parts of him playing that Mike role and stuff like that. And you needed your defensive line to dominate. It doesn't feel like that anymore. You will have probably some looks with Dotson as essentially a battering ram coming in as the fifth rusher. Stuff of that will be happening. And it's a beautiful thing with this defense right now. I almost love what I'm seeing more now, as it feels like a committee defense rather than Sean McDermott just feeling comfortable with a couple all pros that he knows he can lean on. They will be the superstars for him and everything's great. So I love what's going on with our defense, everything like that. Switching it over to the offense now, Joe. Let's talk about the fun stuff. Let's talk about the fun stuff. And we've been talking a lot about good things with the Bills. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but it's a more open question. Is there any real concern right now with Diggs and what is going on the past few weeks? Are we feeling like there is something more than what is just simply, we'll call it load management, snap management, target share management, whatever you want to call it, with Diggs? Is there something greater to be concerned with when it comes to him kind of dipping in his output?
I'm going to say this first. I do not think Joe Brady is sabotaging Stephon Diggs' usage to prove a point. I will never believe that because that is absolutely insane. That is just ridiculous to me. You want to take and alienate your best receiver for the sake of proving that you can perform without him while he's not on the field. Now, here's my thing. What I do think is happening is that you are seeing a drop in Diggs usage for two reasons. Number one, I do think Stephon Diggs is banged up, and I think we've seen him on the injury report before. We've seen whispers of injuries that he might be dealing with that aren't something that could keep him out, but something he has to play through. I know Adam and Banged Up Bills on Twitter, and Banged Up Bills did this a few weeks ago. He had a tweet about how Diggs in that Jacksonville game went down really hard, and there's a very visible shot of him like in serious pain. And then, they talk about like back issues. And I know on Eric's show, he mentioned something that could potentially be a core issue. So you think about that over the course of a season, you think about Stephon Diggs taking hits in the open field, and you think about aggravating it. I think that would lend itself for anyone to believe that there are times where Diggs needs to come off the field for both a breather and maybe for personnel reasons that don't involve an injured Stephon Diggs. So another thing is that the Bills have made a concerted effort to run the ball significantly more now. Joe Brady uses James Cook. He wants to get him involved. He wants teams to respect the run. And more importantly, he wants defenses to defend a Buffalo Bills run, because when they sell out for it, because if you look at the ratio, the Bills are running without Diggs on the field 69% of the time. That is an Eric Turner tweet reference, by the way. Go check that out. Defenses know when Diggs isn't on the field, they're most likely going to run the ball. You don't want an injured Diggs in there to run block when Trent Sherfield or Gabe Davis are significantly better run blockers and also probably healthy enough to have an output there. So I think it is a coupling of, one, he's not fully healthy, and two, because this team is running significantly more and Diggs might be dealing with something, he's not on the field as often. And I think this is just a team that, in the wake of an offensive coordinator change, is going through a bit of an identity crisis, but it's also been successful at times. And I think that while we watch this offense kind of transition into something different, we have to be mindful of the fact that Joe Brady has a playbook that isn't inherently his, has to make do with what's in front of him, and ultimately has to look at what he thinks is going to alleviate the pressure of Josh Allen and make things easier and more respectable for his offense, which has been the running game. And that one has been really behind the legs of James Cook that have been very successful in pretty much every game, sans the Chargers game in this past week. So to answer the question, I don't think Stephon Diggs, there's any bigger issue there. I don't think Joe Brady is in the meeting room with Josh Allen giggling, like doing this, saying, we're not getting Stephon Diggs on the field. That'll show him. What I think is happening is Stephon Diggs is not 100%. I think because he's not 100%, there are times where Stephon Diggs can actually be a liability in certain sets and groupings of plays you want to run, because he might not be able to get a runoff. He might not be able to have the same burst to sell a route to make a defense respect it. But also, Luka, one final point. I think we have to understand that defenses know that Stephon Diggs is the Buffalo Bills' primary weapon. And Stephon Diggs is someone that Josh Allen does feel a pressure and obligation to get the ball to, because why the hell wouldn't you? And in the case of this back half of the year, I think that you're seeing not only a not 100% Stephon Diggs and all the reasons I mentioned before, but also Josh Allen kind of trying to make things happen when they shouldn't happen, or really just trying to get throws to him when they might not be available. But also, there have been times where he's been open and he got the coverage beat and Allen misses him downfield. And I want to stress something. I love Josh Allen. I think he's a franchise quarterback. I have supported him. I didn't like the pick, but then I supported him because I realized I was wrong. But Allen is a lot to blame in this situation too. And when we talk about a drop in receivers production, you have to be honest about the quarterback throwing him the ball. If Josh Allen, and I tweeted this, Luka, you can go retweet me right now. If Josh Allen makes two more throws, one against the Chargers where he doesn't underthrow a ball on a broken play, and last week against New England where he had Diggs who had a step and overthrew the ball, this conversation is not happening, because Diggs would have multiple games of either over 75 yards, maybe even 100 yards and a touchdown. So I think the issue is, while yes, there has been a drop in his production, and I do think there's a valid reason for it, he's still productive. And I think that it just hasn't sank up in the way because they're not hitting explosives more consistently. So that is a long-winded answer, but that is my honest take on this entire thing.
Joe, I love the long-winded answer. I normally do that to Josh, honestly. So I'm it's sitting on the other side of it. It's kind of fun. It is a funny conversation to me. It had to be a point of emphasis on this show. It's an overall conversation happening in the Bills community, and it makes sense because when you look at the numbers, when you look at the production, yeah, you could be concerned just by strictly looking at that. But love your two-road kind of conversation there. It's one of the things that it's not a criticism on Josh Allen. It's just if you're going to point the finger at potential issues with Diggs, you need to make sure you understand that there are probably issues there as well when it comes to Josh Allen, maybe not doing everything he could to maximize what Diggs is able to give you as well. Because yes, there were clear opportunities where it just didn't happen. I will say this. I also saw someone bring up the fact Diggs is double teamed a lot. That's actually not the case down the stretch. I saw someone saw something and read somewhere that the misconception about Diggs being doubled and that's probably what's happening is pretty wild, because when they looked at it and they really looked at the core, yes, you would see bracket coverage over on Diggs' side, but it would actually be because the personnel that's dictating it or the formation or whatever it is, because the Bills offense likes to run a lot of option routes at that side where then Diggs would be lined up. You would see the exact same defensive coverage kind of flipped with Davis at times, because again, that, RPO, whatever it is, that option route that is out over there that they understand the Bills love to run with that ISO man on one side, that's where it is. So they're going to bracket that so you can't get beat on both the underneath and the over top. Stuff like that's happening, and Diggs isn't truly being doubled anymore. I think it was Sims, honestly, that brought it up lately. Maybe. And that was the one that I was like, really? So I had to dig into it, and it was like, yeah, he's not, it's not a notable thing. He's getting doubled just like any other receiver. It's just, there's probably a lot of different things. No one's 100% at this point. He is 30 years old now. There are those kinds of things, but on top of it, yes, I think your point about Allen, that is a valid thing itself. There have been opportune moments where he is open, and unfortunately, Allen just could not get him the ball for whatever reason there was. So there's a lot of different things in here. Overall, am I concerned about Diggs? The answer is no. I think the snap share situation with it all, the last time we saw Diggs hit the 80+% was the Kansas City game. That was the last time we had a true, like, back against the wall, you need to win this game. Look, you're not feeling that way, even though you did need to win that game in LA against Eats and Stick. The yellow synergy there at quarterback. You didn't have to win that with Diggs. You should be able to find a way to win outside of Diggs. You don't need him out there all the time, so on and so forth. I would fully expect 80+% to come back in Diggs's realm this game, because truly at the end of the day, they need to have it. There's that realistic scenario where it's 2 seed or nothing. That's all it is. Right.
It's like
the craziest situation in NFL, recent NFL history that I can recall either. I genuinely cannot, like, if we were in the, the old 1 through 6, instead of that 7th being there, could you imagine just a bye week or no playoffs?
Right.
Like, what a wild look. So
it's insane to think about. And I just have one more thing too. Like, yeah, you think about the teams they've played over the past 2 weeks, and you should never take anyone lightly in the NFL. But again, you think about load management for a potential injury, knowing that in the third one of those games is your division rival for a playoff spot, and also looking at how your defense has played and the confidence in them. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that load management was quite literally to up his snap count in this upcoming game, because you saw what he was able to do. It had, kind of depleted Dolphins secondary that, guess what, is kind of depleted again, because even though they didn't have Ramsey the first time, now they don't have Howard in this game. So it really wouldn't shock me at all if his snap count goes up. And also, he's still been used in screens. He's still been used in runs. Like, it's also not like they're avoiding getting him down and dirty. I just feel like, as far as explosiveness, as far as burst and his agility, that might be hampered when you're talking about something that could be a quarterback issue.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And honestly, a talking point that I would love to talk about right now kind of jumps off this. Roy brings up a thing. I would love to get your take on this, Joe, because it's a polarizing conversation, not necessarily in a super high-low situation, but just overall, I do feel like I hear a lot of different things on Joe Brady. There are a lot of different opinions, feelings, how they want, Joe Brady to be handled even after the season. We don't need to have future talk about this. Just with the current kind of where we stand with Joe Brady. How do you feel about him? What's your honest opinion? What do you like? What do you dislike? What overall? Just give the picture.
Yeah.
What are your feelings on Joe Brady?
I'm going to start this. I have another thing of stats written down that I'd like to thank, if it was Roy or whoever suggested that, for bringing this topic up. So since the bye week, the Bills are 12th in offensive EPA per play, 9th in success rate, 15th in dropback EPA, and 23rd in dropback success rate. But their rushing offense is 4th in rushing EPA per play and 2nd in rushing success rate. So what I like about Joe Brady, first and foremost, is that there have been concerted efforts in his game planning and a recognition of game situation. I felt like with Ken Dorsey, it wasn't so much about the idea behind his play calling, but the idea that, you basically let these guys run their routes and everything has to be figured out on the fly. It puts so much pressure because you're essentially adding chains of error to each layer of an offensive play. Josh Allen drops back. These receivers have an option route. Now I have to know what the coverage is. I have to know not only what the coverage is, but where they're choosing to run and whether that DB is going to match them because they recognize their route in real time, which slows everything down. Those didn't go away, but what I do think happens now is rather than continuing to rely on that until your back is against the wall and you have to pivot, Joe Brady does smell game situation, know when the right time to bring something out is, and gets to it. And I really like that. And I also like that when it works, he doesn't need to back off of it. Again, Dallas game was consistently pulling tackles and exploiting the lack of physicality on Miami's defense by punishing them with heavy downfield blocking and sending James Cook down the field over and over and over again because you didn't need to get off of it. And when you see them struggle, they try to tweak things. Again, the Philadelphia Eagles game, passing was successful in that game until the very end when they started floundering a touch. What do? You start bouncing James Cook to the outside and mixing in Ty Johnson to have a change of pace back and absolutely gash Philly and end up taking the lead. Should have won that game. A.J. Brown fumble. We don't need to talk about that right now. But I think Joe Brady does a really nice job of recognizing game situation, knowing when to pivot, and knowing that when something works, you don't need to get off of it. Where I have some concerns is how creative he's getting. Again, it is a Ken Dorsey playbook, and I would like to see some more tweaks to how we use our tight ends and a little more of James Cook in the passing game. I also think James Cook has had some blunders that he's responsible for, but I would love to see more downfield stuff with James Cook minus like one wheel route and then kind of wait till the goal line to get him involved. I would love to see more of what we saw with New England, where you got Dalton Kincaid down the field and you actually exploit the fact that they're going to one-on-one him down the field, and Kincaid, who's a good route runner, can get that step. I feel like we haven't seen too much creativity, but I can't truly say if that's a Joe Brady problem or the fact that he has to run a playbook that isn't totally his with his modifications. So I've been all in all pleased. I do think that there have been kind of drops in the productivity of both Josh Allen and the pass protection, which has led to some of the numbers I've given you. And I don't know how much of that I can really blame Joe Brady for, but I will say that I've been pleased with the pivot, and I'm glad that he has allowed this offense to find some momentum as well as some revelations in how they can attack people. And I hope that Miami is his magnum opus.
That's I love the finisher on that. Yeah, it would be nice if this is his crown jewel, essentially, but overall, I share a lot of the thoughts on concerns. I will say my biggest concern is truly that creativity in the downfield passing game. It feels like it's non-existent. And I will say this, I understand the point where it's like, hey, this is not his playbook technically. This is the Dorsey playbook. I would imagine he had some insight to it. He has an understanding of it. He understands the philosophy behind it. He is part of the offensive coaching staff, even when Dorsey was there. It's not like he was pulled off the street and it's like, hey, here's the binder. Get accustomed to it and feel it out. What I do love is that he doesn't get in the way. I've said it before on other shows and stuff like that on my other programs. It's like, ultimately, he doesn't get in the way. Whereas Dorsey seemed to always get in the way. He didn't have that game sense. Another thing you brought up, that it does feel like Brady does have that kind of, he understands how to get his finger on the pulse of the game, and just truly, like the Dallas one was a chef's kiss. He understood the power of that pulling tackle and just what was going on in the run game that was working so well that was like, we're just going to continue to do this. Like,
Yeah.
don't break it. Like, don't do something else just because it's working so dang well. Just let's keep doing it. So that's where I like, he recognizes things. He's got a good pulse on the game. It's just that creativity, that downfield passing, something that it does make me laugh where you go, this guy was a passing coordinator, although he did have Joe Burrow and 2 All-Pros at wide receiver in the college ranks. So, I mean, just, take that for what it is, but he was a passing game coordinator, and yet somehow it feels like it's lacking creativity at times. I would love to see that up a little bit. There was the Kincaid splash, kind of like you said, that would be a great thing to kind of bring into this. Going into the passing game, though, Josh Allen owns the Dolphins historically. He is absolutely their daddy. It's just the reality of it. Josh Allen bosses the Dolphins time and time again. There is the, of course, famous image to Bills fans where he looks disappointed. He's staring into space. And yet, honestly, he still dominated the Dolphins 35-0. It's one of those things where it's like, it almost wasn't good enough for him, even though it was still a very dominant performance, both by the team and even still respectable in the offensive game itself. So are we going to see something more like that now, especially considering that recent form we've seen with the passing game, with Josh Allen, with Joe Brady's offense, things like that? Or is this going to be a different Dolphins game for the Bills where maybe what we're seeing is going to continue? Can we expect basically Josh Allen to kind of come out of this funk we've seen him in the past couple of weeks in the passing game and return back to that dominant form? Because in all reality, if he could do that on Sunday night, going into a playoff spot, if we do end up winning this game into that 2 seed, and he kind of gets out of that shell right at the right time, I feel like that would be the best possible scenario to maybe make that serious postseason run. Is that something we can expect with all things considered in these past couple of weeks?
I think well, for starters, if you believe in due, I do certainly think Josh Allen is due to have a better game. And I think, I'm not a huge fan of historical trends until the historical trend becomes an absolute, elephant in the room. And Josh Allen's passing stats, overall stats against Miami since he came into the league, are genuinely just so jarring that you can't turn away and be like, well, that's just 10 times that he just happened to have a good game. In the one loss, he actually had 400 yards. And in the other loss, he also had a game-winning touchdown dropped when Charles Clay was wide open. So really 12 games against Miami that Josh Allen has at minimum been competitive and at maximum been quite literally the second coming of Christ. It literally makes no sense to me. But what I would call it is just sometimes you have an edge, you have some sort of reason when you match up against a team, and Josh Allen's team that he kind of puts the fire in his eyes for is Miami. And what a convenient thing that happens to be the team that he's great against in this scenario when he's really bad against teams like the Jets or sometimes the Patriots. I think right now, though, I do believe he's due for a big game. And I think what you've seen the past couple of weeks, again, I don't know what goes on in the offensive room, but it would not surprise me if the play calling is stripped back a touch and a little bit more vanilla as you are playing some inferior teams that you feel your defense could keep you competitive with. And maybe you don't have to bust out the wrinkles as much because they haven't been playing either good defense or they have a very good defense, but you don't want to show too much in the wake of a big game coming up. And again, I feel like a lot of the things you're seeing this Bills team run are the same run concepts over and over again, which again, they're not really too outlandish with how they do it, but they still kind of keep it simple and some short to intermediate throws with very few explosives sprinkled in. So I think because of that, I would expect Joe Brady, Josh Allen, in the wake of a do or die matchup to start bringing more things out. And what I think they can really do that lends itself well to how the Bills can pass against Miami, besides the fact that they don't have Xavier Howard, is that Miami does not match up well against pass-catching running backs and pass-catching tight ends, which a tight end catches passes, so that was kind of implied. But they don't match up well with them. They're bottom half of the league in both statistics as far as EPA against. They can get passed on when you have shifty running backs out of the backfield that can exploit those linebackers as well as tight ends that can do the same thing. And if we're talking about maybe opening up the playbook to get a bit more vertical against Miami, then that allows you to do more with your tight ends. If you want to run 12 personnel, have Knox be your blanket in the middle of the field and let Kincaid roll down the field, because we haven't seen too much of that this year, sans a couple of plays against Denver and New England where it was successful. So I do believe that this is the game where Josh Allen can absolutely improve his passing stats. Whether he's going to get the same output that he did against Miami in week 4, where it was just an absolutely unbelievable game from him, I don't quite think so, because I do think Jalen Ramsey and Eli Apple can hold it down a bit more than Cater Kohu and a banged up Xavier Howard. And plus, this probably allows them to move Kohu into the slot a bit more, which I know is more of his strength than vertical corner play. But I think this is the game that Josh Allen can get himself a bit more right. I don't think it's going to be perfect. I think he's bound to throw his turnover or have a mistake or two in this game. But I also think that this Bills attack can be a bit more productive given those matchups that the Dolphins struggle with. And they might exploit that early and often to try and generate some explosives. So I would say if I had to predict a stat line, I think Josh can hit his 300-yard passing mark and maybe call it let's call it 3 touchdowns and one pick.
Okay. Wow. I like the prediction. I wasn't going to ask for that, Joe, but I like the prediction. I will say, as a betting man with some futures on there, I need him to throw for 6 touchdowns. So we'll see how that one works out. But he just needs 205, I believe, to hit his over on the passing yards. So that one I feel a little bit more comfortable with.
Yeah.
I'm with you when it comes to explosive plays being there kind of inside the numbers. But then on top of it, I think the Xavier Howard being out, that injury situation, it couldn't be more perfect, because whereas Jalen Ramsey obviously can be that shutdown guy in the perimeter, he's actually kind of been struggling the last few weeks. He's been getting beat and things like that. And we've honestly seen this team beat Jalen Ramsey even a year prior. So it's there to be had. Eli Apple is Eli Apple. So just take that for what it is. He can do some stuff, but at the same time, he can easily be beat. And Kohu will probably go to a slot position, which is more of his forte. But if that's the only place you're getting a benefit, the boundaries aren't working. You have a pass catching running back, like you mentioned, where they struggled mightily. And then you have a Kincaid or Knox who's still coming back and doing his thing. And Allen still wants to proceed to throw him the ball as well. There are a lot of opportunities to be had in the passing game in this game. Mm-hmm. I think that is going to be understood by Joe Brady. That is going to be understood by Josh Allen. I fully, honestly predict and expect them to kind of go back to a little bit more of a passing lean. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get out from under center. I think the under center, kind of what they're trying to do, is going to be essential, because they're going to still want to, as we talked about earlier, make you respect that run game. They're going to still run it more than what we used to see in the past, where essentially it was, by the end of the first quarter, abandon the run game. It doesn't exist. And we're just going to, it's Allen and shotgun and empty set the whole time. They're not going to go that route, but still, even going back to like that Kansas City game, I had it pulled up here. Sorry about that. I switched tab. They threw that 42 times in that game. The last time they were in a back against the wall, the ball was in Allen's hands a lot and plenty. Since then, it was only 15 pass attempts, 21. And then there were technically 30 in the New England game, but it really, it was a weird one.
And also, a thing to note is that Miami, since their bye week, has second rushing EPA defense. They're hard to run against. They're very difficult to run against, and I think you're going to more likely see a high amount of passing attempts for Josh. But when I say matchup against running backs, I just mean in the passing game. Like, Cook will be on the field. He might not be getting as many carries, but you're certainly going to throw him the ball in short situations, and I think that's where he can really do some damage in this game.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Again, it's similar to how we were talking about the defense matching up really well against the Dolphins offense. The Bills offense feels like one that is built for a lot of success against that Dolphins defense. And that's why we've seen a lot of the success over the years with Josh Allen, with everything going on there, that it's hard for you to see kind of outside of some sort of catastrophic situation. Josh Allen should be able to hit that 300 mark. I agree with that. I'm going to say he throws for 6. No, I'm just kidding. I can't realistically say
I hope.
I'd
love that.
My wallet would love it. Us as fans would love it. We would all be ecstatic about that one. But I'm with you on the 303. That seems like a safe place. I am also in agreement. You have to just live in a world where he's going to turn the ball over at some point. I would love for it not to be in a situation where he's, running out in the open field and just dangling the ball out there while he's getting cracked in the back of the head or something of that nature, like we saw last week. I would love for it to not be that scenario, but if he throws a pick, it is what it is. That is just the life you live with Josh Allen. If you don't try to neuter him off of that, if you don't try to hold him back because of that, you will still get those highs that he's absolutely capable of getting you. And at the end of the day, he will get you. So it's just one of those things where I'm not going to sit here and be like, don't complain about those turnovers. Turnovers are turnovers, and you can complain about them all you want. You are a human being. You're allowed to have your opinions. It's just, I am not the kind of individual who's going to be like, not again, Josh. It's like, that's just the life of living with 17.
Yeah.
We are fans of the team and we are fans of him, and he's going to do it.
And I don't know how updated it is. I haven't checked it in a while, but I do recall there was a list and the amount of EPA lost by interception. So, like, you throw a pick, how much does that affect your team negatively in points allowed? He wasn't even in the top 10 because you also have to remember some of his turnovers are situational ones, like arm punts. And that happened, I think, like 4 times this year. I know he did it against I think it was either the Raiders or he did against the Commanders. He's done it a few times to a point where, like, there was literally an interception he threw that generated positive EPA because they were in like a 3rd and 20 situation. He aired it down the field. It got picked off at the 20 and like barely brought back to the 25. That's literally a punt and probably a better result than a punt, which is why it was positive. So I think the thing to remember too is not every pick is the same. And I'm not going to be mad at Josh if it's 4th down at like the goal and he throws a pick and he, like, nothing was open, or if it's like, I mean, if nothing was open, I want to clarify. I'll be mad if he throws a pick and something was there. But certain situations, like Josh just throws a turnover, and ultimately how the turnover goes will affect my view of it. But remember, too, punts are turnovers. Like, if you get a 3 and out and Miami has to punt, I consider that a turnover. They're giving you the ball back. It's just not as flashy because it didn't happen in real time or take as much time. So, yes, that is the Josh Allen experience 100%. It's probably going to happen against Miami. And if it doesn't, that's great. But ultimately, if Josh is doing enough on offense to mitigate the consequence of that, and this defense has the opportunity to just, not have to be on the field as much, I'll live with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You just should live with it. I will say it's situational. Absolutely. I'm with you. It's one of those things where you remember the deep shot interception week 1 against the Jets, the one week 3 against the Commanders. Those ones, it's just like, okay, arm punt, as you referred to it, whatever you want to call it, that is what it is. But then you get the ones like, it is frustrating a little bit where you get the ones like against, Taylor Britt against the Bengals, where he just is not reading what is happening. He just predetermined where that ball was going based on his pre-snap look. And it's like, you would like for him to understand, or at least look at that before he truly pulled the trigger, and not just assume that guy who does look like he's going to be squatting down on Diggs is actually squatting down on Diggs. You would like to confirm that before you throw the ball.
And it usually works. That's the worst part of it. Like, that worked like last season a bunch of times, that honey hole shot. And now they defend it differently because they bait him into the throw and they know that. Like, it's just
coaches and players are pretty smart in this league, and tape exists. They eventually catch on to those things, right? And it's a gamble by him. It's a gamble by everyone. But it's like, you would like Allen not to do it. But even then, that's where you live with it, because Allen is one of those few quarterbacks who, even if the window looks like it's closed, there is still the slight potential chance. Not in that case, that was right into his gut. But in a lot of cases, you can still see him kind of thread a needle and put one in there where it's like, I'm going to live with it at the end of the day. So I expect Allen to have a big game. It sounds like you expect Allen to have a big game. I'm excited to hopefully see that. I will say now, X Factor time, Joe. Who or what or how or whatever you want to put in this slot, you can. It can be coaching, it can be an individual player, it can be a positional group. Yeah. What do you truly believe that this game is going to come down to? What is your X factor? What do you feel like the win-loss balance is truly on when it comes to this Bills Dolphins game?
So I'll do offense and defense. And offense, I have 2. One is a person. It's obvious it's Josh Allen. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that because it's way too obvious. So I'll give you a group and I'll give you a concept. Concept is motion. I want to see them motion the ball a lot more in this game because I want to see if Jalen Ramsey's sitting in a spot or not. Because if Jalen Ramsey is sitting in a spot and I can motion Diggs to the weaker side where I have to worry about Eli Apple and Kohu in them, I'm doing that every single time. We know Miami will put him in man-to-man spots, but they'll also drop him into zone and have him maintain a side of the field, which Jalen Ramsey's getting up there now, so I understand why you do this more routinely. But considering that they don't have Xavier Howard and you are now assigning Diggs to a different part of the field, that is something I'm doing every single time. And I noticed that they haven't ran motion as much over these past couple of weeks. I fully expect them to run it a shit ton against Miami. Sorry, I cursed. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this show. Okay. I fully expect them to up their motion rate a ton in this game. I think that's a huge X factor in how you can manipulate their defense and throw them off balance, especially since on tape the past couple of weeks, if it's been ran vanilla, they have vanilla tape. You don't really know what to expect from them. But as far as like true players, Kincaid and Knox, it's the tight ends. I think the tight ends are going to change everything for this game. And I think creative game planning with your tight ends to modify and manipulate how this defense wants to defend you when they've been expecting, you to run a bit more or for Diggs to get a brunt of the carries and maybe assign the coverage to him. I think this is golden opportunity for Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid to get some really meaningful receptions and really meaningful yards. And I think that this is a golden opportunity to stretch the field out with Dalton Kincaid, maintain a quality receiver in your slot, whether that's Davis or Khalil Shakir, and really get creative with how you move these tight ends around the field. Because I think, again, Miami doesn't match up well against them. You saw Baltimore last week use their tight ends, use Isaiah Likely, but also use their running backs. I think getting them involved, getting a concerted effort to get the ball in Kincaid's hands early, beat him deep, beat him close, will not only allow the tight ends to eat and get you some productive yards and scores, but also open it up for your running backs, including Ty Johnson, including James Cook, who are also going to be a huge part of this game plan. And as well as when you know they're spreading the ball out and you see them able to maneuver in a way that isn't just so Diggs dependent, that is when Stephon Diggs will enter the picture. And I have a feeling that that connection is going to happen in this game. And we'll see something to, throw a bone to the Diggs isn't getting anything done crowd and be good there. On defense, it's the defensive line. 10 times out of 10, I'm picking this matchup every single time because this is the matchup that I think won them the game in week 4. Send the hounds, but also get creative. And having Daquan Jones back is so infinitely massive to how this defense can now attack Tua, as well as, manipulate what he's going to see pre-snap. Whether you want to drop Jordan Poyer into the box with a dime package, maybe make them think that Jordan Poyer is going to blitz, but then last second before the snap, Poyer's dropping back into coverage, and you have, if Dotson somehow on the field at the same time or someone else is on the field that you could send through the gap. I think all that pre-snap confusion that you can offer Tua will be a part of this pass rush, having Daquan Jones back, being able to eat double teams and make you more concerned that the 4-man pressure is effective enough to get creative with how this team blitzes. So I think that is where your game is either won or lost, is how productive your pass rush is. Being able to have pressure, make Tua hold the ball because the back end coverage is going to take the spot away from Tyreek Hill, is ultimately what decides this game for you, where if he has to look off Tyreek and there is no hope for him and you have to get him off script, I think you win the game for that reason. So those are my X factors going into Sunday night's game.
I like the offense defense. It wasn't even an idea I had. I was just thinking one thing, Joe, you gave like 5, but I love all of it.
Sorry.
It's all good. Yeah, I do. The defensive line was exactly where my head was at, to be quite honest, but I will alter it a little bit because I have a little bit of it. It's the same, but different a little bit. And I guess thinking it through, they need to be able to get home. So the pass rush is ultimately where this game will be won and lost. You need to, as you pointed out, confuse Tua. So I will just say your Tyrell Dodson situation, which I fully expect him to be rushing a handful of times. So I will even say your 5-man rush game, it needs to get home. If you can get home in this game to ultimately make Tua not feel comfortable on top of second guessing what he's seen in front of him with a lot of things like you mentioned, where you see Poyer coming down into the box, but then dropping back, which is the confusion of coverage is a staple of a McDermott defense, just ultimately creating this kind of loose coverage pre-snap, and then it just forms itself post-snap and whatnot. That is a big, big thing where you need Dodson or whoever it is that is, if they do come through, getting home. Because I feel like in that Bengals game we saw earlier this year, they tried doing something like that and they just never could get home. And that's where you lose the game, because if you're sending extra guys on top of it and you're not getting home, naturally holes are there to be had. And if you have a good enough passer, which Tua is still good enough of a passer to find those spots on the fly, he will kill you. So that on the defensive side is basically in agreement with you. I think that is basically where this game will be won and lost. On the offensive side, I truly believe that this game is going to be kind of down to the utilization of slot / tight end. So it's kind of jumping off of where you're talking. I'm basically thinking inside the numbers, and it feels like a repetitive theme, honestly, at this point in the past month. But if they can ultimately understand how to get the ball into the slot, which I would love to see Diggs get a lot of looks in the slot. I would love to see it. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but of course, we'd like to see our number one guy getting some slot looks and getting some opportunities there. But your Khalil Shakirs, those types of individuals on top of Kincaid, Knox, and even Cook, as we talked about, this defense is just not good inside the numbers. They have so many opportunities to be had on the off, for the offense that plays inside that. The successful play that Baltimore had that it's ingrained in my brain from last week was where Isaiah Likely essentially just slipped underneath to a wide open area when they're in and goal and just basically walked into the end zone. Bills run similar concepts when in those same kind of situations. They love to do it. It's a 49ers thing. 49ers do that with Christian McCaffrey all the time. Somehow, the best offensive player in the league gets lost in the line, but the Bills do similar things. We've seen it with James Cook. I would imagine we're going to see a lot of that. I do think motion is another great shout out. I think that is something that we will probably see a little bit of a dictate and just getting some eye candy out there, where ultimately then you are just creating those cushions of opportunity in the middle of the field to then eventually break down and get further, bigger, more explosive plays. I just think the game offensively is won and lost inside the numbers. It won't be on the boundaries, because eventually, if you can be successful inside the numbers with your Jalen Ramsey and Eli Apple on the boundary, eventually you will find those downfield passes. If they have to commit inside the numbers, those guys one-on-one without getting any sort of assistance from the safeties, because eventually you're luring them in, you're going to get it with whether it's Gabe Davis, whether it's Stephon Diggs, whoever it is on the outside. They will have their opportunities later on in the game. So ultimately, I think my X factor offensively is essentially inside those numbers. I'll just give a shout out to a slot on top of everything you said. It's just that is truly where you can attack the Dolphins. So that's where I would expect it to be. It's prediction time. Everyone in the chat, we appreciate you guys being there. I've been trying to click you. It's a little bit more difficult when I'm in the driver's seat, trying to do it on the left side of your screen rather than the right side where I normally sit. But ultimately, appreciate it. If you will have a prediction, I will try to click it through this moment in time. Be sure to, whatever score you feel like. If you want to throw out stats out there, have fun with it. It's up to you. What do you feel like this game's going to be? And Joe, I will kick it over to you. Final prediction. What do you think happens in this game?
I haven't toyed with a score, but I guess just on the fly here, I think it's going to be a similar game to what you saw the last time these two had their second matchup in Buffalo last season. I think Miami's going to modify the way they run to try and attack the nickel a bit more like they did last year, where Taron Johnson kind of just got bullied by some downfield blocking and they had a lot of success with it, and their speed will just kill you at those points. I don't think we hold them to 20. I think Miami could very realistically score 24-27, maybe even more. But I think Buffalo's offense in some of these matchups that I could foresee them exploiting, as well as the wrinkles I think they'll pull back out. I think they're going to have a good game. And that's why I think it's going to be a high scoring affair that could be very similar to the pace of last time, except a little more on Miami's side. So let me just say, for the sake of giving you a score, I'm going to call it, let's call it 33-20. Let's call it 33-24.
All right, 33. That is not a number. Look, I love you didn't do a 27-24 like
Too
Josh
easy.
wants to do.
Too easy.
Josh did do 28-22 in the chat. Shout out, Josh. Appreciate you stopping in, even though you couldn't make it for the show yourself. There wasn't a dig. It was just, I appreciate you being in the chat. I will say this. The confidence I said that I've had basically for a month now going into this game, expecting this game to be exactly what we find it to be now, where it is winner takes the division. Winner is the 2 seed. Winner is in a great spot when it comes to the AFC playoffs. When you really break it down, honestly, you could have a serious world that, essentially the 2 will eventually play Kansas City, who is the 3. If the Bills are the 2, I do think Kansas City could take out Miami. If the Bills are, of course, in that 6th spot, it gets a little more complicated. I'm honestly rooting for Joe Flacco going to Baltimore happening. Everyone wants to see that. So we need the Bills in the 2 to make that more realistic.
Yeah.
But overall, I've been as confident as I've been. I'm not going to change. And when I got into that mindset, when I got thinking about this game, Joe, all the way back, a friend asked me, well, what happens if that game comes? And ultimately, I think the game script for this game is truly going to be where the Bills are going to come out so hot early that it puts doubt and concern and questions in Miami, where they already, as I mentioned before, and everyone should know at this point, Miami has the playoffs locked up. They have that 6 seed in their pocket. There is no worse they can do than that 6 seed. If they can just jump down their throat early, if they can just enforce what they're trying to do, ultimately, I do think that a reality check will come in Miami's mind where they might lay off the gas a little bit, because at the end of the day, I also mentioned the division is not everything. You are just trying to put yourself in the best position possible to make a playoff run. And the Dolphins may have to get to a point where if Jalen Waddle's at 70 to 80%, you got to take him off the field. If this game is not going to be worth it, you got to take him off. Things like that. I do expect the Bills, with urgency in mind, with their backs against the wall, potentially fully, because it's either two or out. I expect them to come out hot, and I expect them to get it done by end of third quarter. I'm expecting the Bills to win this game 38-17. I don't think it's even going to be close. I think the Bills match up way too well. They've been trying for this opportunity this whole time. They've been building up to this moment, and they're going to jump down the throats of Miami early to eventually just kind of force them to concede in a way. They're not going to own up to that, but you could see Jalen Waddle all of a sudden not out there come late third. You could all of a sudden see, if Mostert's playing, not be out there come late third. Things like that where it's like, hey, we're going to lick our wounds. We're going to deal with what we got, and we got a game in Kansas City next week. That's what we're going to worry about now. We're going to make sure we're at full health for that. And if Miami does that, by the way, if this scenario plays out, fair play on them. That's exactly what I would be doing. That's what you should do. It's like, this is not how you lose the season. How you lose the season is, a Bradley Chubb injury happening in the fourth quarter that they just experienced. And now all of a sudden you go to Kansas City down a Jalen Waddle, a Ray Mostert, and now you're really in problems. So you can't find yourself in that situation. I think the Bills have a great opportunity in front of them. 38-17 is my score prediction. I just truly believe that they have a great opportunity in front of them where they will come out swinging.
Yeah, I think that a hot start is very imperative for this game because, again, the best way to win this game is to take that running game out of it. Like, their running game is so explosive where I think you literally need to be up by like 3 scores to make me think that they're going to start selling out to pass, because that's what this defense wants. Again, you said it earlier. Their strength is in passing. Their strength is in their secondary. Their strength is in their pass rush. Anything you can do offensively to alleviate that pressure by taking their running game out of it is so beneficial to this matchup. And I think, again, I don't subscribe totally to the idea that if you go up by a big enough lead, you're going to end up being you're going to see them kind of, I don't want to call it, you didn't describe it as waving a white flag, but kind of like maybe Waddle's not on the field as much. Maybe they don't do this as much. First, I think Jalen Waddle being on the field is going to be a huge tell because he's probably going to be on a snap count knowing that they go to the playoffs anyway. So if he's on the field, I'm fully predicting that to be a pass play or maybe some sort of play action. So that's something that I think they're going to watch out for. But again, I feel like a division title when you are Miami in their shoes, going up against the Buffalo Bills team that's won it 3 years in a row, has denied you a playoff spot, has really thwarted your every last attempt at anything over the past 4 years. I think that means something to these guys in the locker room. So I think they're going to play a very competitive game. I don't think they're going to lie down and die, but I certainly think that the Bills have an opportunity to really just silence a lot of narratives, to make things, a lot better in that locker room, a lot better for them going forward. Getting that 2 seed presents so much opportunity, especially when your first matchup could potentially be a banged up Houston team or a Colts team playing Gardner Minshew as their quarterback that struggled against good teams. Like that, to me, this is just, I think the Bills recognize that. And I think that's why, even though I think Miami isn't going to lie down and die, you're going to see a galvanized Bills team out there one way or another. And whether it's a slow start or not, I think they're going to find ways to score and really make it something that they can be proud of.
Yeah. The 2 seed thing, the opportunity that the Bills have with that 2 seed and the Dolphins, I agree. It's not like I'm expecting them to just go, well, we'll give it a first quarter try and see where it goes. No. I think they go into this game fully expecting to play 60 minutes trying to get the division. It's just, if you can force that thought of doubt, force that thought of, are we still trying to go for this? As soon as you get that planted in their brain, that's when you have them. That's when it's over. And ultimately the Bills understand that they're in a situation where they can never let up. So they just have to keep going regardless. And it's just one of those things where this Bills team plays great with their back against the wall, and the Dolphins do have that crutch. So between that, a couple injuries, it's just where my head's at. It's kind of been that way, though, honestly, before these injuries became as prominent as they are. But yeah, I mean, everything about that game kind of, it rolls into, you mentioned the Colts and the Texans and stuff like that. Real quick before we get done and wrapped up and everything with this show, Joe, let's just be football fans here. Let's just talk about a little bit about the rest of the league. The biggest one being, in my eyes, that Texans-Colts game. Let's live now in a world where we just both predicted the Bills to win.
Right.
All right. So obviously we won't know that until the result of this Colts-Texans game has already happened. You're sitting in the 2 seed. Who would you rather see come to Buffalo and you want to win that game because realistically that winner will be the 7th seed. Do you want to see the Texans or do you want to see the Colts? I'm very curious about this answer.
Yeah, so I was originally going to say Colts. I said it earlier in the week. I switched my mindset, and I'm saying Texans. I absolutely love CJ Stroud. I love CJ Stroud. And I was one of the people, I'm taking some credit for this. Back in I want to say June, I did a show about state of the AFC, and I said I think Houston is a dark horse to win their division, and or a dark horse to make the playoffs too. Look at where we are now. Houston deserves respect. I think they're a good team, well coached, great, really hungry defense, but they're a hurt team. And CJ Stroud has been exceptional this year, but you do not have Tank Dell. Nico Collins is banged up. Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce are a pretty good running back duo. We know Singletary, though. And McDermott is just very, very good against rookies. He's very good against rookies. And in a playoff game in Buffalo, CJ Stroud potentially having his first ever playoff game, road game against the roaring Bills crowd with Sean McDermott throwing insane amounts of pressure, a banged up offensive line, a receiving core that could be better, but because of injury isn't at its full potential. I like that more than I like Colts, Shane Steichen, and mainly Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss coming back into Buffalo and having to worry about that. And also, I think the Colts receiving core right now, because of health, is significantly better. I think Alec Pierce has found his stride. Michael Pittman deserves respect. They have a good tight end. Like Josh Downs hasn't been the greatest this year, but has had some success. I think that's a team that is very sneaky. They have lost to some good teams in the way, but I do think Houston is a more favorable matchup, especially considering that while their running backs are good, I don't think they have the same dynamic playmaker that is Jonathan Taylor. And therefore you can kind of mitigate that without having to stack the box too many times. And I think you could create some problems for CJ Stroud and put yourself in a good spot there.
Yeah. Josh, I just pointed him out real quick. He also would not like to see the Colts. There is potential snow in the forecast. I mean, we're looking out a little bit here, but at the same time, I understand where Josh is coming from. I'm going to be honest. I didn't want to play the Colts, and it has nothing to do with Jonathan Taylor. Like, Jonathan Taylor is almost like the cherry on top for me. The disrespect Gardner Minshew gets, which is somewhat warranted. I think he has played great for the Colts this year. And I think those wide receivers do a phenomenal job for what they are as athletes themselves. They're not the fastest individuals in the world, or even in the league, of course, but they are great when it comes to what they try to achieve in that offense. And Shane Steichen has done everything. He has been a phenomenal coach for them, where it's like, I have been comfortable betting on Gardner Minshew this year. And that is crazy to say, but at the same time, I'm the kind of guy where it's like, I respected the Colts, and the Colts don't have a great defense at all, but they still have like a DeForest Buckner who can ruin you on the inside. They still have a thing or two in there where it's like they can hold their own. And as long as the ground game's going, plus Gardner Minshew is not, being god awful, they can absolutely get you on any day. It's just one of those things where I don't want to see the Colts. And it has, again, not truly because of the ground game itself, but just overall, I think they're a better team at this point. And I do love CJ Stroud too. I have proof where I even had an image when we were doing our draft show where I was sold up until about 3 days before that CJ Stroud was going to be the number one pick because he was the overwhelming best quarterback in my eyes in this draft. And somehow the Panthers fumbled the bag on that one and fell in love with Bryce Young. But regardless, I digress. It's one of those things where they are banged up. As you said, the X factor for them, Tank Dell, is not there. If they had Tank Dell, that'd probably tip the scale for me alone because he's been incredible for them, blowing the top off of every defense they've played with CJ Stroud. Will Anderson is also banged up at this point. It's just one of those things where if you get a limping Texans, as you pointed out, coming into Orchard Park at that point, you would feel very good about your situation and where you are, and that you will hopefully be hosting a Patrick Mahomes playoff game in your house,
dude,
which would be the greatest. Not only I was on a Chiefs podcast earlier this year, Joe, or I guess last year technically, but they even were intrigued by a Mahomes road playoff game. If that first one could be in Buffalo of all places,
I'd love it. I need it. I need it like oxygen, dude. And again, that's why I think this matters so much. Like, I want the playoffs no matter what I do. I'm fine going in as the 7th seed because with the way this year has gone, getting in feels like a luxury. But man, the thought of the fact that there is tangible or a realistic possibility that you could be the 2 seed. You could host Patrick Mahomes finally coming back to Buffalo for a playoff game with fans in the stadium, knowing that offense has had its struggles, even though you should have never bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I want that. I want it so bad. And that's why I think this game is a foresight into that possible matchup. Or you could see Miami come back, maybe. Or you could see, I feel like the possibility for really fun and exciting football happens way more if Buffalo gets that 2 seed, because that atmosphere would be bananas. It'd be so much fun.
Yeah, in my eyes, Buffalo getting the 2 seed, if you're a general football fan, is just better. Because one, you have Josh Allen in the playoffs in a good position. 2, you're getting Tyreek then going to Kansas City finally, which is something we all want to see, because then they're going to have to play Kansas City. And I also think Kansas City should be able to take care of Miami in that respect, which then opens up the possibility of Joe Flacco with the Browns going to the Ravens, which is all time.
I want that.
So just imagine, 15, but imagine old 5 walking into his old home and beating the Ravens as a 1 seed. Oh my god, the conflicts of all those fans.
And they realistically could. Baltimore should be and I love what the Ravens have done this year. I hated their offseason before they got Lamar back. Now I think they're awesome. I have infinite respect for Baltimore. They should be terrified of that. I'm even saying this as a Bills fan. I want nothing to do with that Cleveland team. Nothing. They are. Listen, we talk about Baltimore with all this praise. That team is terrifying. Their defense is electric. Their offense has found its stride with Flacco. They can run. They can throw deep. They can throw intermediate. And the worst part, they're hurt. They're doing all this injured. And it's absolutely insane to me that they've had this level of success. They're still the number 1 defense in the league in EPA. It's unbelievable. And they're a scary playoff team to think about, dude.
Yeah, you don't want to play Cleveland, but at the same time, if it's Cleveland coming to Buffalo for an AFC championship,
hell yeah,
you'll just take it because it is what it is.
Because it's the AFC championship game in Buffalo. Absolutely.
Right.
I'm not saying I wouldn't want that. Just maybe against a team like I want the young and inspiring team with the hurt quarterback to go on a miracle run, then come to Buffalo and get their heads cut off. Like, that's what I want.
Yeah. End of the day, that's exactly what everyone wants. It's like we can root for what it is. It's just like on the other side where I'm rooting for Matt Stafford going to Detroit. I'm rooting for that whole situation. And it's like, man, that's great. If we can get 2 situations where you have the old steed coming into that barn and taking care of business in his old stomping grounds,
I think
it's just beautiful.
If that matchup happens, by the way, I'm fully in on the Rams. In fact, I think the Rams are going to go on a deep run. I'm saying it now. They're electric, bro. They're so electric. Puka is indefendable. Cooper Kupp doesn't need to be the key lean on feature anymore. Like, they have so much good output from their rookies, and Kobe Turner and Aaron Donald on the same line. Kobe Turner is not being mentioned at all. He's an absolute stud rookie D lineman. I am all in on the Rams going on a run. I don't know about Super Bowl, but like, the Eagles are beatable. Dallas is beatable. Detroit is beatable. The NFC is a group of beatable dudes. I really think the Rams are going to shock people. And if I'm wrong, feel free to clip this off. Feel free to embarrass me on public. But I have a lot of irrational confidence in the Rams. And yes, I did curse again, Sandra. I'm sorry. I hope you don't have children watching.
I was going to say, I was going to use this as the closeout here because Joe did curse again. No, I'm not. Not because he cursed again. But we've been going for a little bit over an hour now, and almost an hour 15. So, Joe, thank you again. I mean, if I have your Twitter here down below, God, I keep pointing to the right. I have your Twitter and Cover1's Twitter below you. If you have anything you want to plug right now, real quick, be sure to shout it out right here real quick while you have the stage.
Yes. So my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. I host a show for Cover1 every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. called Under Review, where I have a new guest every week to talk about the current state of affairs in the Buffalo Bills. And when we hit the offseason, it'll become a bit more draft-centric, as well as free agency and all of the fun stuff that happens in the offseason. Luka and Josh have both been on it. They're great guests. Luka, I really appreciate you having me. If I may, I just have one more interesting observation before we sign off regarding this Miami matchup that I think you might want to hear.
Shoot away.
So I decided to do a little sleuthing while we were live and look at the top 10 EPA defenses in the league for this entire season. So that's in order: Cleveland, Baltimore, Jets, Dallas, Saints, Chiefs, Falcons, Niners, Raiders, and then the Buffalo Bills. The Miami Dolphins have played, of this list, the New York Jets twice, Baltimore, Dallas, Kansas City, Las Vegas, and Buffalo. In the Buffalo game, they scored 20 points. Against Vegas, they scored, oh, wait, I had it wrong. I actually have to find that one again. But it wasn't a high amount. Tua struggled in that game. I know that for certain. Against Kansas City, they scored 21 points. Against Dallas, they scored 22 points. Against Baltimore, they scored 19 points. Against the Jets, in the first matchup, they scored 27. The score was higher at the end of the game because of the unbelievable pick six and 30. However, the Jets' offense is dreadful and wasn't able to keep the defense off of the field. The Jets are still a high EPA defense. The point I am making is the Miami Dolphins have a consistent trend where they either struggle for, if not the whole game, at least part of the game when they play really good defenses. And considering, and by the way, that Dolphins game against the Raiders was 20 points scored on offense. They are a team that has had the luxury of a very soft schedule. It is what it is. You beat who's on your schedule. That's fine. I don't hold that against you because if the Bills did the same thing, I'd be saying the same point. But it is to be said that when you play the teams that have the tighter defenses, you put up these numbers that I wrote in terrible handwriting on a sheet of paper that I pulled out while we were live. So do not be surprised at all if there is similar success and this Miami team does happen to score less than 24 points. I do think that Miami, seeing the Bills before, benefits them and what they can do to adjust. But I also think the fact that they're hurt, the fact that Tua suffered a shoulder injury, which we haven't talked about on this show, but that could be a factor in how well he's getting the ball out, how much pain he's feeling, how accurate he could potentially be when accuracy is his bread and butter. Don't be surprised if Miami's passing offense struggles and they put up similar numbers to what they've put up in recent weeks.
It's a great point. It's a great point to finish on too. I like that one. Yeah. They are who they are. They struggle against great, and then they just kind of feast on the weak. And that's just what the Dolphins have been ever since we've seen McDaniel, Tua, Tyreek, Waddle, Mostert, all these guys. Like, they are a great team. They're electric. They're fast, but they feast on the weak, and they kind of are just average at best, maybe above average at times against better teams, against great defenses, especially. They do struggle. So, Joe, thank you for joining once again. I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone for watching. It's been fun. Hopefully, when I am back with Josh, for our Monday morning podcast, we will be talking about a Bills win. But regardless, we will be back Monday morning with our podcast. All of you have a great Friday evening, and please, let's go. Let's just get a win. Let's get the 2 seed and have a comfortable, relaxing week as we go into super wildcard weekend. All of you, take care.